tonight, Arizona Senator, war hero, and former presidential candidate John McCain has died. I'm Janine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. McCain's death comes just over a day after it was revealed that he was no longer seeking treatment for brain cancer. McCain was diagnosed in July of last year. McCain was born August 29, 1936. The son and grandson of four-star admirals, McCain graduated the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1958 and later flight school in 1960. At the start of the Vietnam War, McCain volunteered for combat duty. In 1967, during a bombing run, his plane was shot down. He was captured and held as a prisoner of war until 1973. For his service, McCain earned the Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and Distinguished Flying Cross. After his release, he served as a Republican congressman, then later senator from the state of Arizona. McCain ran for president for the first time in 2000, but lost a heated primary season to former President George W. Bush. He eventually secured the nomination in 2008, but lost the general election to former President Barack Obama. Fox chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel takes a look back at the long and distinguished career of Senator McCain.
John Sidney McCain III was born in 1936 at a naval air station in the Panama Canal Zone. McCain's father and grandfather were both four-star admirals. The family moved often between bases on the mainland and abroad. It was inevitable he would pursue a Navy career, and Ensign McCain graduated from the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1958. As war broke out in Vietnam, McCain volunteered for duty. He flew attack planes against the North Vietnamese and escaped serious injury in June 1967 when a rocket aboard the aircraft carrier USS Forrestal accidentally struck McCain's plane. Explosions and fires killed 134 people.
I felt this tremendous blow to my airplane and saw the fire coming out, so I probably had reacted a little more quickly than those in the planes near me. Some of those in the planes near me didn't survive.
On his 23rd air mission on October 26, 1967, his plane was shot down, this time during a bombing mission over Hanoi. The North Vietnamese captured him and moved him to the infamous Hanoi Hilton prison.
He was terribly injured, fractured arms, broken knee, left arm was out of the socket. He had not been fed, and basically he was starving to death.
McCain's captors offered him early release because he was an admiral's son, but he refused. He endured torture and more than 3 years in solitary confinement. He said Air Force Colonel Day saved his life.
Bud Day was the most steadfast, the most inspirational, and the toughest of anybody that I must have something to do with his Iowa upbringing.
McCain was released in 1973 and awarded Silver and Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and the Distinguished Flying Cross. His wounds left him with impaired physical abilities for the rest of his life. He retired from the Navy as a captain in 1981 after marrying Cindy Hensley, a teacher from Arizona. He moved to Phoenix and got into politics, serving 2 terms in the House of Representatives. He was elected to the Senate in 1986, where he developed a reputation as a maverick. While he voted with his party most of the time, it became clear he was willing to buck Republican leadership and occasionally align with Democrats. McCain's political career hit a bump in 1989 when he and 4 other senators, the Keating Five, were implicated in a savings and loan scandal and accused of corruption. A Senate Ethics Committee investigation found that though McCain used poor judgment, he was not guilty of any wrongdoing. McCain said that experience inspired him to co-author the McCain-Feingold bill on campaign finance reform with Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold, which finally passed in 2001. And as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, he took on the tobacco industry with legislation to increase cigarette taxes. McCain published a memoir, Faith of My Fathers, in 1999. It became a bestseller and later a film. In the meantime, he announced his candidacy for president appealing to independence and traveling aboard the Straight Talk Express. But after defeat in South Carolina, Texas Governor George W. Bush gained momentum, and McCain went on to lose 9 of 13 primaries on Super Tuesday. He withdrew from the race in March 2000, returning to the Senate. The senator threw his support behind President Bush and the Iraq War, but he later criticized the Bush administration for not sending enough troops to Iraq. He became the first Republican senator to demand Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld's resignation.
We're in one heck of a mess in Iraq. And the American people told us loud and clear last week that they're not happy. They're not happy with the course of this war. Neither am I.
He also continued to partner with his colleagues on the other side of the aisle. McCain and Democratic Senator Ted Kennedy made a push for comprehensive immigration reform, though the legislation failed to pass both houses. With President Bush's second term coming to a close, McCain again announced his candidacy for president.
I do so grateful for the privilege this country has already given me, mindful that I must seek this responsibilities for reasons greater than my self-interest.
This time, McCain won the majority of delegates on Super Tuesday, and then in the March 4th primaries, giving him the lead he needed to secure the nomination. McCain's surprise vice presidential pick was Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. Together, the two surged ahead of Democratic candidate and Illinois Senator Barack Obama and VP candidate Joe Biden in the polls following the Republican National Convention. But Obama gained momentum and ultimately defeated McCain in the general election.
These are difficult times for our country, and I pledge to him tonight to do all in my power to help him lead us through the many challenges we face.
As ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, McCain remained active on foreign policy. He rallied for military intervention in Libya against Muammar Gaddafi, pushed for democratic reforms in Egypt, and called for withholding U.S. aid to the Egyptian army after it ousted President Mohamed Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood party. He also publicly criticized the Obama administration for its handling of the September 11, 2012 attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens.
Have no doubt, we are holding the President of the United States responsible, and he is responsible, and he has given contrasting versions of events to the American people.
In 2015, McCain became chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee and used the platform to push for an expanded U.S. military presence in Iraq and Syria and a new strategy in Afghanistan.
We need to have a strategy to win. The strongest nation on earth should be able to win.
As the 2016 presidential election candidates began to emerge and he campaigned for his own Senate re-election, McCain pledged to support the eventual Republican nominee. He later pulled his endorsement of Donald Trump, citing their differences on public policy issues like national security and Trump's controversial comments about women. Then, in the midst of his 6th Senate term, he underwent surgery to remove a blood clot above his left eye and was later diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumor. Despite a poor cancer prognosis, he remained a dominant voice in the Senate, at times going against his own party's efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. In July 2017, some senators audibly gasped as Arizona Senator gave a memorable thumbs-down gesture on the floor. McCain cast the deciding no vote, which killed the GOP's health care measure. All this as McCain released another memoir in his final days, The Restless Wave, a brutally honest assessment of his highs and lows, personal and professional. The Maverick senator offered this candid assessment, writing, "I'm not sure what to make of President Trump's convictions. His reaction to unflattering news stories, calling them fake news, whether they're credible or not, is copied by autocrats who want to discredit and control the free press. Flattery secures his friendship, criticism his enmity." In an audiobook excerpt, the man who made public service his life's passion reflected on what he considered his unfinished legacy.
Maybe I'll be gone before you hear this. My predicament is, well, rather unpredictable. But I'm prepared for either contingency, or at least I'm getting prepared. I have some things I'd like to take care of first, some work that needs finishing, and some people I need to see. And I want to talk to my fellow Americans a little more, if I may.
John McCain is survived by his wife Cindy and 7 children. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
And we have just received a tweet from Cindy McCain, quote, My heart is broken. I am so lucky to have lived the adventure of loving this incredible man for 38 years. He passed the way he lived, on his own terms, surrounded by the people he loved, in the place he loved best. Senator John McCain, 1936 to 2018. And joining me now by phone, Brett Baer. Good evening, Brett.
Hi, Judge.
All right, Brett, who have you heard from, and what were your initial thoughts when you heard that Senator McCain had died?
Yeah, obviously we knew this was coming, and when the family announced that they were stopping, he was stopping medical treatment for brain cancer, that the days were numbered here. I think you're going to see an outpouring of support from both sides of the aisle. You've already started to see it. President Trump has tweeted out his sympathies to the family, so has the First Lady, as well as congressional leaders all over the place. But just in the past minute, George W. Bush sent out a statement. And remember, George W. Bush ran against John McCain in the GOP primary in 2000 and butted heads with him, Judge, in numerous times when I covered the White House and the Bush White House. He said this, quote, "Some lives are so vivid, it's difficult to imagine them ended. Some voices are so vibrant, it's hard to think of them still. John McCain was a man of deep conviction and a patriot of the highest order. He was a public servant in the finest traditions of our country, and to me, he was a friend whom I'll deeply miss. Laura and I send our heartfelt sympathies to Cindy and the entire McCain family, and our thanks to God for the life of John McCain." That's from George W. Bush.
Beautiful
43rd
words.
President.
Beautiful
Obviously,
words.
President Obama has put out a statement. Joe Biden. I think what you're seeing, Judge, is reaction to the death of a man who was unique in Washington. And I think there are going to be a lot of people looking back at his life and all that he did for the country. Serve the country, not self.
Well, what is so striking is all of the things, or are all of the things that he's accomplished. I mean, there were 23 bombing missions that he was on, and then his political life, as well as writing a bestseller, winning 6 Senate elections. But I think probably what he would be remembered most for is the fact that he was a maverick, that he was someone that wasn't as concerned about politics as he was about what he believed in.
That's right, Judge. Just in the past second, as you were talking, Sarah Palin, his vice presidential nominee, puts out a statement. "Today we lost an American original. Senator John McCain was a maverick and a fighter, never afraid to stand for his beliefs. John never took the easy path in life, and through sacrifice and suffering, he inspired others to serve something greater than self. John McCain was my friend. I will remember the good times. My family and I send prayers to Cindy and the McCain family." That from Sarah Palin, his vice presidential nominee, who, he obviously in years later said that he had, doubts whether that was the right pick. But the fact, you're seeing all kinds of statements from all kinds of ideologies because he was kind of bigger than Washington.
And let me just interrupt for one moment. What we're seeing now is a flag being lowered to half-mast at the State House in Arizona. Brett, all of the people who will be referencing the impact that John McCain had on their lives, I guess we're able to see so many sides of him. Not just the fighter pilot, not just the politician, but the statesman. I mean, the man who was chairman of the Armed Services Committee, who could comment about wars and Benghazi and Iraq, and everyone would certainly take him and what he was saying seriously when it came to the art of war, if you could call it that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he was controversial at times, and he fought for things and fought against things that went against not only his party, the other party. He was very adamant that that the fight against Al-Qaeda should be very strong. He was a big proponent of a kind of big, strong military. He was not a proponent of any kind of torture or enhanced interrogation techniques, and that was a pushback that he made in the Bush administration.
Right.
He had a lot of power as the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and the military revered him. And you've seen statements from Secretary Mattis and others already tonight.
Well, and also, in addition to aggressively pushing for an expanded U.S. military presence in Iraq and Syria, and he also, I guess, true to his personality, caused a stir in 2013 when he ventured into Syria to meet with opposition leaders whom he hoped could topple Bashar al-Assad.
He did. And, some of those pictures were questioned about who was who and why was McCain meeting with them. He was always pushing, felt that the Obama administration really dropped the ball as far as getting the opposition organized in Syria, and was a big talker about the red line that no longer was a red line for President Obama in Syria.
Yeah.
He was also very critical about Iraq and how that was being operated and how the military was being handled. He, Lindsey Graham, Joe Lieberman, others, they had a number of different senators who stood with them on foreign policy issues particularly.
And, just following up on the issue of the military, Senator McCain had opposed a repeal of the military's ban on openly gay service members, but said he'd work to see the new policy was effectively implemented. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He was firm on his conservative beliefs in one way, and he was pushing against some elements of his party in another. That happened throughout his career in the Senate. It happened when he ran for president. And, I think people will look back at some of the stances he made and say this was a stance on principle. If you go back and look, Judge, at the last speech he makes in the well of the Senate, that is his philosophy. That is John McCain. And it's worth, and I bet in next day or two, there'll be a lot of pointing back to that speech.
Well, I'm sure we'll probably pull it up very soon. But last question to you, Brett. I mean, you were in Washington. You had occasion to know the man, the senator. And, I get this sense, and I've had him on, he's been on this show, Justice, a few times. But I get this sense that he was always a guy who was in a rush, that he had a lot to do, that there was always a lot going on in his head. Tell us about the personal John McCain, when you were not on camera with him and the little back and forth you might have had with him.
He was a jokester. He was, he loved kind of giving you a little needle here or there. He loved popping in and just waving and saying hi. We had an online show after Special Report on Wednesday nights for a long time, and he was doing a live shot, I think, with Greta Van Susteren in the studio next door. And we were in the middle of talking, and he just popped in. He just walked right into the studio in the middle of the online show, which was great because it was the online show, and we just let things roll, and we turned the camera, and he sat there and just talked to us. And I took my microphone off and held it out. He was just kind of a freewheeling spirit and loved to joke with reporters, especially the ones on Capitol Hill. I was there on the night of the healthcare vote, and he was essentially teasing all of those reporters about standing outside the Senate about how he was going to vote.
Really? What was he saying?
He had kind of an impish grin when he would walk by you.
Interesting, and quite a notable evening. Brett, thanks so much for giving us insight into the personal Senator John McCain. And if you're just joining us, Senator McCain has passed this evening. And right now we have a tweet from President Donald J. Trump. My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and our prayers are with you. Again, Senator John McCain passing this evening. We have Senator Mike Huckabee. We're going to go to him right now. Senator Huckabee. Okay, I'm sorry, Governor Huckabee. Governor John McCain, I assume that you knew Senator John McCain?
Yes, I did. You demoted me.